HR stood at the head of the conference table, shoulders pulled so tight they looked wired into the ceiling. The room felt too small, too quiet, and too bright for what was about to happen. My boss, Adrian Keller, tapped his pen against his knee like he owned the moment. I kept my hands folded in my lap, steady, because I already knew how this would end. Lena from HR cleared her throat. Per the findings of the ethics division, this is a formal termination order for Adrian Keller. The pen slipped from his fingers. He stared at her, then at me, as if the universe had suddenly knocked his script out of his hands. I reached into my bag, pulled out the thin envelope I had prepared the night before, and slid it across the table with the same calm I wished I had learned years earlier. "Give this to him," I said. Lena hesitated, then placed it in front of Adrian. He tore it open with a single quick motion, confident at first, then slower as he realized there was nothing inside except one line and a small USB drive. "Play it." His jaw tightened. For a moment, no one breathed, no one moved. His fingers hovered over the USB like it was radioactive. I watched his expression shift, not fear, not anger, but recognition. He knew exactly what might be on that drive, and he knew it was enough to topple the version of himself he had crafted so carefully. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Voice sharp. "I brought it," I answered. "You remember the meetings as well as I do." Lena straightened, unsure whether to sit or stand. "We'll need to review this immediately." Adrian opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time since I had met him, he was silent. Not strategic silence, not calculated control, just silence. The kind that tells you a person finally understands the consequences waiting for them. I leaned back in my chair. The path to this moment hadn't been clean or brave or simple. It had started in a much smaller room, with a much smaller mistake. 3 months earlier, in an elevator. All I did was bump his coffee, and that was enough to light the fuse that led us here. 3 months earlier, I stepped into the elevator still half awake, clutching my own cup of coffee like a lifeline. The doors slid open, and there he was, Adrian Keller, the new vice president whose reputation had already spread faster than any memo. He didn't smile. He never did. I moved to the side. "Morning," I said, just out of courtesy. He shifted forward at the same moment I did. My shoulder grazed his arm, and his cup jerked. A thin ribbon of coffee splashed across his sleeve, barely more than a few drops. "Oh, sorry," I said immediately. "I didn't see you move." His eyes dropped to the stain. Then they lifted, slow enough to feel like a warning. Small accidents lead to big consequences. "Alara," I blinked. "It was just a bump." "A bump," he repeated, voice flat. "Of course." The elevator doors opened, and he stepped out first. He didn't look back, but the message sat heavy in the air, like he'd just made a note under my name. Later that morning, I noticed the first change. A meeting invitation, one I had been scheduled to present in for weeks, suddenly disappeared from my calendar. When I asked my teammate Jenna about it, she frowned. "Adrian said he didn't need you there," she said. "He told me to handle your section." I walked to his office. "Did you remove me from the product sync I asked?" He didn't look up from his laptop. "You seemed distracted lately. Thought I'd lighten your load." I wasn't distracted. "Tone. Alara," he murmured. "Watch it." The next day, he reassigned one of my core projects without explanation. The day after that, he forwarded an email I wrote, clipped out my signature, and added his name instead. When I walked past him in the hallway, he gave a polite nod. The kind you give someone who doesn't matter. The coffee spill had been a moment. A small one, but I could feel something shifting under my feet, subtle and cold, and it wasn't going to stop. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in, quiet enough that I kept telling myself it was nothing, but Adrian knew exactly how to make nothing feel like a warning. One afternoon, he stopped by my desk. No greeting, No context. Ilara, he said softly. I've been reviewing your communication patterns. I turned in my chair. What patterns, you hesitate? He murmured. People notice hesitation. Who noticed? He smiled a little. That's not important. Later that week, I watched him call Marco from engineering into a conference room. 40 minutes later, Marco came out pale and wordless, headed straight for the stairs. By morning, his Slack profile was gone. The next day, he pulled Sarah Kim into the same room. She didn't even sit down when she came out. She walked directly to her desk, grabbed her jacket, and left. She didn't return. I found him near the break room, leaning against the counter like he was waiting for me. Ilara, he said quietly, I hope you're staying focused. I'd hate to see your work slip. My work hasn't slipped. His voice dipped even lower. Perception matters more than truth. I stared at him. Did you say the same thing to Sarah? He tilted his head. Sarah struggled with pressure. Some people simply do. The next morning, after barely sleeping, I went to HR. I sat across from a representative named Tessa, hands clasped so tightly they hurt. I think something is wrong. I told her, people are leaving after these closed-door meetings. Adrian is isolating me, pulling projects away, whispering things that make no sense. Tessa nodded sympathetically. It sounds like leadership style differences. Some managers are more assertive. He's not being assertive. She folded her hands. If you have documentation, we can take a deeper look. Documentation, evidence, proof. Things Adrian was careful not to leave behind. When I walked out, I felt the distance around me widen, invisible but undeniable. Sarah Kim left Adrian's office with her hands shaking so hard she dropped her badge twice before she reached the hallway. I stepped toward her. Sarah. What happened? She didn't look at me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Protect yourself. That was all she said. Then she walked toward the elevators and didn't come back the next day, or the day after that. Her desk sat untouched, a quiet reminder of what happened behind Adrian's closed door. I found him near the copy machine 20 minutes later. Did you speak to Sarah? I asked. He smiled without turning. Feedback session. She needed clarity. She quit. Some people quit before they embarrass themselves. I stared at him. You pushed her. He shrugged slightly. Pressure reveals truth. I felt heat rise in my chest, but he walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with the unmistakable sense that he had already chosen his next target. I went straight to HR. Tessa glanced up when I entered, her expression already weary. Ilara, is this about your manager again? I need help, I said. Sarah walked out crying. This isn't normal. Tessa folded her hands. We can only intervene if there is documented evidence of misconduct. I told you, he whispers. He does everything quietly so no one else hears. I understand it's frustrating, she replied. But without proof, it becomes a matter of interpretation. He is pushing people out. You must see the pattern. She hesitated, then said the same thing she had said before. If you can provide documentation, we can move forward. When I walked out of her office, the hallway felt colder than the rain outside. The building hummed around me, but none of it felt like a place meant to keep me safe. That night, I sat in my car in the driveway, rain sliding down the windshield in long, unbroken lines. I kept my hands on the steering wheel until they went numb. No one was coming to help me. Not HR. Not anyone inside that building. It was just me now. The night after HR turned me away again, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and my hands still trembling. I typed slowly at first, then faster as the results came up. One-party consent, I whispered to myself. If I'm part of the conversation, I can record it. It felt unreal, like I had stumbled onto a crack in the wall he never expected anyone to find. I ordered a small recorder. Nothing fancy. Just enough to do the one thing HR kept demanding. The following morning, It arrived in a plain cardboard box. I slid it into the inside pocket of my blazer and headed to work with a knot in my stomach and something new layered beneath it. Resolve. Around noon, Adrian sent a message. Come to my office. Now. When I stepped inside, he didn't look up from his laptop. Ilara, he said calmly, your recent behavior has raised concerns. What behavior? You undermine culture. His voice was steady, almost pleasant. You resist alignment, and your team feels your attitude is unstable. No one on my team said that. He lifted his eyes. Perception is reality. I slipped my hand into my blazer and pressed record. What exactly are you accusing me of? I asked. Undermining my direction, he said, rejecting feedback. If this continues, I will have to consider a role adjustment, a demotion. I said. He smiled. Words are irrelevant. I kept my voice level. You're twisting things I never said. Truth bends, he replied. Strong employees bend with it. I felt something harden inside me. You can't keep doing this to people. He leaned back in his chair, amused. People who cannot handle pressure are not meant to stay. The recorder caught every word. When I walked out of his office, my heartbeat was unsteady, but my hands were no longer shaking. I had the beginning of something he couldn't whisper his way out of. The next week, Adrian moved faster than I expected. It began with an email sent at 6 a.m, need the full quarter analysis by tomorrow. No exceptions. I called him immediately. That report takes at least 3 days with a full team. You have 1 day, he said. Prove you can adapt. By noon. He added a surprise audit, asking me to account for every task completed in the past month. This is unnecessary, I told him. He simply replied, some people hide inefficiencies. I want to see if you're one of them. 2 days later, he summoned me again. Ilara, he said, I'm hearing that you're becoming a negative influence. From who your reaction tells me everything I need to know. He pushed a folder toward me. For this new collaboration, you'll work closely with Thomas Green. I stared at him. Thomas was laid off last month. Find a way, he said. If you cannot adapt, that tells me something about your readiness for future roles. This is intentionally impossible. He leaned back, pleased. Pressure separates those who perform from those who pretend. I walked out, gripping the folder so hard the edges bent. At my desk, Malik from Support Ops slid a donut onto my keyboard. A small, sticky note clung to the wrapper. Powdered revenge. I looked up. He didn't smile, but the understanding in his eyes was enough. During lunch, Jenna from Product passed by and whispered, He's watching everyone. Be careful. I know, I said quietly. He's trying to break me. She exhaled sharply. Then don't crack where he can see it. Adrian kept escalating one impossible task, one whispered insult, one quiet accusation at a time. He thought I was bending, but each word he spoke was another piece of evidence slipping into my pocket. It happened on a Friday afternoon, the kind of hour when people start packing up and pretending the weekend has already started. Adrian sent a short message, conference room 3, now. When I walked in, Tessa from HR was already seated, hands folded too neatly. Adrian stood behind her chair as if he needed the height advantage. Tessa, I said. What's going on? She glanced briefly at Adrian, then cleared her throat. We have concerns about your conduct. Ilara. Adrian stepped closer. Multiple concerns. What concerns? I asked. Tessa slid a printed stack of emails across the table. Your tone in these messages has been interpreted as hostile, resistant, and dismissive. I scanned the papers. Every email had been cut, clipped, cropped, missing context, missing entire threads. These are incomplete, I said. Adrian smiled. They show enough. This is manipulation, I said. This isn't accurate. Tessa kept her eyes on the table. The decision has been reviewed. We are terminating your employment effective immediately. The room went still. I felt something sharp twist in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. You are firing me based on edited emails. Adrian walked around the table, slow and deliberate. Small accidents, he murmured, close enough for only me to hear. Big consequences. Tessa pushed a cardboard box toward me. You may gather your personal items. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the trap closing, but also the weight of what I had already prepared. Inside the box, beneath a notebook and a sweater, rested the thin envelope I had packed the night before, and next to it, the USB drive that held his true voice. I looked up at Adrian. He expected tears, panic, a collapse. Instead, I lifted the box calmly. Thank you for the reminder, I said, and I walked out of the room with a steady breath and a quiet smile. I sat at my kitchen table with the cardboard box from HR still beside me, unopened except for the one thing I needed. I pulled the USB free, set it next to my laptop, and drew in a slow breath. Time to give this to the right people, I said to myself. I copied every recording onto a clean folder and labeled it clearly. Then I composed a short message to the company's ethics division. No accusations, no emotion, just facts. I attached the files and hit send. A moment later, I prepared the envelope, the one I had printed the night before I was fired. On the front, in bold letters, it read, "Deliver only to HR Director." Inside it, I placed a single sheet of paper with a sentence printed in black ink. If you want the truth, play the drive. I sealed it and walked it to the mailbox before I could second-guess myself. The recordings weren't subtle. The first clip, Adrian laughing at a disabled employee who stuttered during a presentation. The second, him explaining how he manipulated performance reviews to weed out anyone who slowed him down. The third, his casual brag. HR always covers for me. They know better than to push back. And the fourth, the one that made my hands shake when I listened again, I push people until they break. That's how you weed out the weak ones. Every word came out clear. His voice, his tone, his intent. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown internal extension. Please be available for contact. An investigation is underway. I stared at the screen. Not fear, not satisfaction. Something quieter, something steadier. Adrian had no idea what was coming. Lena from HR stood at the head of the table, her posture stiff, her fingers pressed flat against a printed document. Adrian stepped inside the room with an impatient sigh, the kind he used when he thought he was being inconvenienced by people beneath him. What is this, he asked. Why am I here again? Lena didn't answer. She lifted the document as if it weighed more than paper ever should. Adrian Keller, she said, her voice steady, effective immediately. Your employment is terminated for cause. Adrian blinked. What? For cause? She repeated. He laughed once, sharp and confused. This is ridiculous, based on what a second HR representative, Daniel, spoke quietly. We received evidence of serious misconduct. Adrian scoffed. From who? From her? He pointed at me like I was an afterthought. She's a disgruntled former employee. I opened my bag and pulled out the thin envelope I had placed there that morning. I slid it across the table until it stopped in front of him. Give this to him, I said. Daniel pushed it closer. Adrian ripped it open, expecting a threat he could dismiss. Instead, he found a single sheet of paper and a small USB drive. His eyes moved across the page. Play it. His hand froze. His face shifted, first confusion, then something darker. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. Lena didn't give him time to stall. She plugged the USB into the laptop at the table. A click, a pause, and then his voice filled the room. I push people until they break. That's how you weed out the weak ones. The next clip played without mercy. HR always covers for me. They know better than to challenge my decisions. Then the one that made him visibly flinch. Disabled employees slow everything down. Someone has to be realistic. Adrian's face drained of color. "Stop it," he whispered. "Turn it off." No one moved. Daniel finally spoke. "Security is on the way." Adrian looked at me. Rage, shock, something collapsing behind his eyes. I held his stare, calm and unshaking. He was escorted out of the room without another word. 2 days after Adrian was escorted out, I received a call from Lena. Her voice carried an eagerness I had never heard from her before. "Ilara," she said, "the executive team would like to meet with you. There are opportunities we'd like to discuss." "Opportunities," I repeated. "Yes," she said, "a director-level role. We know you've already proven your leadership. We want you back." When I arrived, 3 department heads sat at the table, suddenly warm, suddenly grateful. One of them leaned forward. "You've demonstrated resilience, integrity. We would be lucky to have you rebuild operations." I listened without interrupting. When they finished, I folded my hands. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm not coming back." They exchanged quick glances. "You're still employed with us," one of them insisted. "We can adjust your title, your compensation, your team." "This building," I said gently, "is where everything fell apart. I won't spend the next chapter of my life fixing something that was never meant to protect its people." Silence spread across the room. I stood. "You have my recordings. Use them. Learn from them, but I'm done here." That afternoon, I walked into a small office in East Portland where a nonprofit advocacy group met with workers who had been cornered, silenced, or quietly pushed out by people like Adrian. The director, a woman named Naomi, shook my hand. "We could use someone with your experience," she said. "I'm ready." I told her. My recordings were soon anonymized and folded into training programs used by companies across the country, tools to teach leaders what not to become. Adrian, meanwhile, faded from the industry altogether. No company wanted a man whose own voice had become his downfall. One evening, I stood on Telecom Crossing as the sun dipped low, the river catching the last orange light. The breeze felt cleaner than anything inside that old office. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Small accidents, big truths."